A chilling silence had descended upon the world, a heavy blanket smothering the screams and explosions that had so recently torn through the air. It was a silence born not of peace, but of profound absence, a vacuum where life once thrived. Dust motes, like ethereal dancers, pirouetted in the fractured light that filtered through gaping holes in what were once sturdy walls. They illuminated a landscape of shattered structures, skeletal remains of homes and dreams, stretching as far as the eye could see. Every surface was coated in a fine grey powder, a testament to the cataclysm that had swept through, obliterating everything in its path. Amidst this desolate tableau, a lone figure, Elias, knelt. His form was a stark silhouette against the backdrop of ruin, his shoulders slumped in a posture of utter defeat. His face, visible only in glimpses as he shifted slightly, was etched with a grief so profound it seemed to have carved canyons into his skin. Tears had long since dried, leaving saline tracks on his dust-stained cheeks, testaments to the torrent of sorrow that had overwhelmed him. He did not weep now. There were no tears left to shed. Only a hollow ache that resonated deep within his bones. His gaze was fixed on a pile of rubble that had once been the cornerstone of his existence, a place where laughter had echoed and love had blossomed. Now, only jagged edges and broken fragments remained, mirroring the state of his own heart. The overwhelming sense of desolation was palpable, a suffocating weight that pressed down on him from all sides. It wasn't just the physical destruction. It was the annihilation of hope, the erasure of a future he had meticulously planned. The air itself felt heavy, thick with the scent of pulverized stone and the faint, acrid tang of something burnt, something irretrievably lost. Every breath he took felt like an effort, each inhalation a painful reminder of the stark reality that surrounded him. He was a solitary island in an ocean of despair, adrift and utterly alone. The silence, once merely an absence of sound, now seemed to roar in his ears, amplifying the emptiness within him. It spoke of endings, of finality, of a world that had irrevocably changed, leaving him behind to bear witness to its tragic transformation. His hands, calloused from years of honest labor, now trembled slightly as they rested on the cold, unforgiving debris. There was no warmth left, no comfort to be found in the twisted metal and splintered wood. The ground beneath him felt alien, no longer the familiar earth of his garden, but a graveyard of aspirations. He closed his eyes for a moment, seeking refuge from the relentless panorama of destruction, but even behind his eyelids the images persisted, burned into his memory. The faces of those he had lost, the echoes of their voices, the warmth of their touch, all were now just phantoms, haunting the desolate chambers of his mind. How could one person endure such an immense loss? How could life continue when the very foundations of existence had been ripped away? His spirit felt as broken as the world around him, fragmented into countless pieces, each one a sharp pain. Yet amidst this crushing despair, a faint flicker, almost imperceptible, stirred within him. It was not hope, not yet, but a nascent stirring, a primal instinct for survival that refused to be extinguished entirely. He was surrounded by ruins, the remnants of everything he had ever known and cherished. In this moment of utter devastation, with no other recourse, he had one choice left: to trust God. It was a choice born not of certainty but of desperation, a last resort in a world devoid of all other options. This was the only path remaining, however uncertain, however shrouded in the dust of his shattered reality. Elias slowly pushed himself up, his muscles aching with a dull protest that mirrored the pain in his soul. His gaze swept across the vast emptiness that stretched before him, a desolate panorama where once his vibrant village had stood. The silence was not peaceful. It was a heavy, oppressive void, amplifying his profound sense of isolation. Every turn of his head revealed another layer of destruction, a new wound on the landscape that reflected the gaping chasm in his own heart. The air, once filled with the cacophony of daily life, the distant shouts of children playing, the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the gentle murmur of neighbors exchanging pleasantries, was now eerily still, broken only by the whisper of the wind sifting through the skeletal remains of buildings. Broken remnants of daily life lay scattered like forgotten memories, poignant relics of a world irrevocably lost. A child's wooden toy, once cherished and well-loved, now lay half-buried in the dust. Its bright paint chipped and faded, a stark reminder of innocence shattered. Further on, a scorched book, its pages brittle and blackened, lay open to a passage Elias could no longer decipher, a testament to knowledge consumed by the inferno. He recognized the faint pattern on a shard of pottery. It was from the dinner set his wife had painstakingly chosen, a set reserved for special occasions, now reduced to fragments. Each item, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, was a dagger to his heart, tearing at the delicate fabric of his composure. The silence was a cruel tormentor, a vacuum that sucked away all warmth and hope. It was not the comforting quiet of a deep forest or a peaceful night. It was the heavy quiet of absence, of lives extinguished, of futures unwritten. In this profound stillness, Elias found his thoughts amplified, his memories swirling around him like spirits in the dust. He closed his eyes, and for a fleeting moment he could almost hear them. The bright, infectious laughter of his daughter chasing butterflies in the meadow, the steady, reassuring cadence of his wife's voice as she read by the fireplace, the boisterous camaraderie of his friends gathered around a communal table. These echoes of laughter and life flickered through his mind with a vivid intensity, starkly contrasting the grim reality of the present. The vibrant tapestry of his past, woven with threads of joy, love, and community, now lay in tatters, replaced by a canvas of grey and brown, painted with the ashes of his world. He remembered the simple pleasures, the aroma of freshly baked bread wafting from his kitchen, the feeling of fertile soil yielding to his plough, the warmth of a shared meal under the evening sky. All gone. The sheer magnitude of the loss threatened to overwhelm him, to drag him back down into the depths of despair from which he had just begun to stir. He was a survivor, yes, but what had he survived for? What was the purpose of enduring such a cataclysm when everything that gave life meaning had been stripped away? He felt like an ancient tree, its branches torn away, its roots exposed and vulnerable, standing alone against an indifferent sky. The emptiness was not just external, it permeated his very being, hollowing him out until he felt like a mere shell, an automaton moving through a landscape of ghosts. The war had passed, its destructive fury having swept through and moved on, but the damage remained, leaving behind only these haunting echoes. These whispers of what was were almost more painful than the initial shock, a constant nagging reminder of the beauty and joy that had been so cruelly snatched away. He stood amidst the ruins, a living monument to a forgotten world, wrestling with the profound weight of its absence. Elias's fingers instinctively sought the worn leather thong around his neck, pulling forth a simple silver pendant. It was a cross, small and unadorned, tarnished with age and the grime of his recent ordeal. This relic, a gift from his grandmother, had been a constant companion, a tangible symbol of a faith that had once felt as solid and unyielding as the ancient mountains surrounding their valley. Now, however, as his thumb traced the cold metal, it felt alien, distant, a hollow promise in a world utterly devoid of comfort. He questioned the fairness of the universe, his mind reeling with the brutal injustice of it all. Why him? Why his family? Why their peaceful village, nestled so innocently amidst the rolling hills? What cosmic balance had been served by such indiscriminate devastation? He had prayed, he had believed, he had lived a life of quiet devotion, yet here he was, the sole remnant of everything he held dear, adrift in a sea of rubble and sorrow. The purpose of his survival, once a burning question, now felt like a cruel cosmic joke. To what end had he been spared, only to witness such profound loss, to carry such an unbearable burden of memory? A profound sense of abandonment washed over him, chilling him to the bone far more effectively than the biting wind that now swept through the skeletal remains of his home. He felt utterly forsaken, a forgotten pawn in a game played by indifferent forces. The God he had once worshipped with unwavering conviction now seemed absent, silent, or worse, uncaring. This feeling, raw and visceral, threatened to consume his spirit entirely, to drag him down into a chasm of despair from which there would be no ascent. It was a spiritual desolation, far deeper and more agonizing than the physical ruin surrounding him. He grappled with the sheer injustice of his loss, the unfairness of having his entire world ripped away in a single, brutal stroke. His hands clenched into fists, knuckles white, as a wave of impotent rage surged through him, quickly followed by an overwhelming sense of helplessness. He was utterly broken, not just physically exhausted and emotionally drained, but fundamentally shattered at his core. The foundation of his beliefs, once so firm, now crumbled beneath his feet, leaving him teetering on the precipice of an abyss. Each breath felt like an effort, each beat of his heart a painful reminder of his continued existence in a world that no longer made sense. The silence, once merely haunting, now seemed to mock his suffering, amplifying the cacophony of his inner turmoil. He looked at the sky, a vast, indifferent canvas of grey, and saw no answers, no comfort, no sign of divine intervention. Only emptiness. The pendant, once a source of strength, now felt like a leaden weight, a symbol of a faith that had failed him, or perhaps a faith that he no longer possessed. It hung precariously, a thread of despair, a faint memory of connection in a universe that felt utterly disconnected. He was a man adrift, his spiritual compass spinning wildly, lost in a wilderness of grief and unanswered questions. The weight was immense, threatening to crush the last vestiges of his will, leaving him little more than a ghost among the ruins. His entire being screamed against the unfairness, against the senseless destruction, against the profound, terrifying silence of the heavens. He sank back among the debris, the sharp edges of broken masonry digging into his legs, yet he felt nothing. His eyes, heavy with unshed tears and the exhaustion of profound grief, slowly closed. He sought not sleep, but an inner stillness, a respite from the relentless torment of his thoughts. The cold, indifferent sky above offered no solace, and the ruined landscape mirrored the desolation within his soul. He yearned for a silence deeper than the one that currently enveloped him, a quiet that could mend, not merely mask, the gaping wounds of his spirit. In the profound darkness behind his eyelids, a memory flickered, faint at first, then growing brighter like a distant lantern in a storm. It was a lesson from his youth, one delivered by his grandfather, a man whose wisdom had always been as boundless as the sky. "Faith, Elias," his grandfather had said, his voice raspy with age but firm with conviction, "is not a feeling. Feelings are fickle like the wind. Faith is a deliberate act, a choice you make, even when your heart aches and your mind doubts. It's clinging to the promise when all around you is despair." The words, long dormant, now resonated with an unexpected power, echoing in the hollow chambers of his shattered being. A quiet resolve began to settle within him, fragile yet persistent, like a determined tendril pushing through hardened earth. It wasn't a sudden burst of joy, nor an immediate erasure of his pain. Instead, it was a conscious decision, a deliberate act of choosing belief despite the overwhelming chaos that had consumed his world. He would choose to believe, not because he felt it, but because he would. He would choose to trust, not because the evidence was before him, but because the alternative was an abyss too terrifying to contemplate. This was not blind optimism. It was a defiant assertion of his will against the crushing weight of circumstance. The internal turmoil, which had raged like a tempest within him, began to subside. The cacophony of doubt, rage, and despair softened, retreating from the forefront of his consciousness. It was replaced by a nascent calm, a fragile peace that felt like the first breath of dawn after an impossibly long night. The ache in his chest remained, a dull throb, a constant reminder of his loss, but it no longer threatened to suffocate him. He was breathing again, truly breathing, for the first time since the world had crumbled around him. This was the surrender, not of hope, but of the need to understand, to control, to demand answers. It was a surrender to the unknown, a quiet acceptance that some things were simply beyond his grasp, beyond his comprehension. And in that surrender, in that deliberate act of letting go, a seed of hope was planted deep within his heart. It was not a vibrant, flourishing sprout, but a tiny, tenacious seed buried beneath layers of ash and sorrow, yet alive. It carried the promise of growth, the potential for renewal, despite the barrenness of the soil. He opened his eyes, and the world, though still a ruin, seemed subtly different. The grey sky was still grey, the rubble still rubble, but his perception had shifted. The weight of the pendant around his neck no longer felt like a leaden burden, but a gentle pressure, a reminder of the choice he had just made. Trust was indeed an act, not a feeling, and within the depths of his despair, he had chosen that act. This fragile peace, this quiet resolve, was his first step on a new, uncharted path, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to find light even in the deepest shadows. He was not healed, not whole, but he was no longer utterly broken. He was choosing to believe. A shaft of sunlight, thin yet resolute, suddenly pierced the oppressive dust clouds that had clung to the air like a shroud. It wasn't a grand, illuminating beam, but a delicate, almost hesitant ray, finding its way through a jagged gap in what was once a towering structure. The light danced, catching motes of pulverized concrete and masonry, transforming the destruction into a shimmering, ethereal tableau. Elias, still seated amidst the debris, his gaze now less vacant, followed the path of this unexpected visitor. It landed softly, almost reverently, upon a tiny emerald-green sprout, pushing its way through a crack in the parched, unforgiving earth. The sight was startling in its simplicity, a defiant declaration of life in a landscape of death. It was barely an inch tall, its two nascent leaves unfurling with an almost shy courage, reaching for the light that had just found it. Elias leaned closer, his eyes tracing the delicate veins on the minuscule leaves, a stark contrast to the rough, broken textures surrounding it. How had it survived? What inherent tenacity drove this fragile organism to emerge from such devastation? It was a whisper of renewal, a silent testament to persistence that resonated deeply within his own recently stirred spirit. His eyes then drifted, catching another anomaly amidst the wreckage. Partially buried beneath a crumbling wall, yet miraculously intact, lay a small ceramic bird. Its glaze, a vibrant cerulean, was still brilliant, unmarred by the cataclysm. It was a relic of beauty, a delicate piece of artistry that had somehow escaped the brutal embrace of destruction. He reached out a trembling hand, carefully brushing away the fine layer of dust that coated it, revealing its intricate details. The bird, with its painted eyes and tiny, upturned beak, seemed to gaze back at him, an echo of grace in a world stripped bare. It wasn't a grand miracle, no instantaneous rebuilding of the world, but these subtle affirmations of life's persistence began to accumulate, each one a tiny pinprick of light in the vast darkness. Then, from the distance, faint yet distinct, a sound reached his ears. It was an unfamiliar birdsong, a series of clear, melodious notes, carrying on the gentle breeze. It was not the raucous caw of carrion birds, nor the mournful cry of wind whistling through ruins. This was a song of life, a declaration of presence, a testament to the fact that not all had been silenced. Elias lifted his head, turning his ear towards the source, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. He hadn't heard such a sound in what felt like an eternity. The world had been so quiet, so tragically silent, that this delicate melody felt like a revelation. These were not the grand, thunderous signs he might once have expected from a divine presence, no parting of seas or descending chariots. Instead, they were quiet, almost unassuming gestures, easily overlooked by a heart hardened by despair. But Elias, his spirit now attuned to the subtle workings of faith, recognized them for what they were. They were whispers of renewal, gentle nudges from a source beyond his comprehension, affirmations that life in its myriad forms sought to endure. God, he realized, often worked through such quiet signs, through the resilience of a tiny sprout, the unbroken beauty of a ceramic bird, the persistent melody of an unseen singer. One only needed to have the eyes to see them and the heart open enough to receive their profound, comforting message. Each small discovery was a thread, weaving itself into the tapestry of his fragile, burgeoning hope, reminding him that even in the most desolate of landscapes, the seeds of recovery were being sown. The external landscape remained largely unchanged, still a stark, brutal canvas scarred by ruin. The skeletal remains of buildings clawed at the sky, jagged monuments to a past abruptly ended. Debris lay scattered like forgotten bones, a testament to the cataclysmic force that had swept through. The air, though clearer, still carried the faint metallic scent of decay and dust, a constant reminder of the devastation. Yet amidst this enduring desolation, something profound had shifted within Elias. The hollow-eyed, defeated man who had knelt in the rubble was gone. In his place stood a figure transformed, his shoulders now squared, his gaze no longer vacant but filled with a quiet, resolute purpose. He began to move, not with the aimless wanderings of despair, but with methodical determination. His hands, once trembling with grief, now moved with a new strength, carefully sifting through the wreckage. He wasn't seeking solace in the past, nor was he clinging to memories of what was lost. Instead, he was looking for the future, for the raw materials from which a new existence could be forged. A twisted rebar, once part of a supporting beam, was carefully straightened, its utility reimagined. A broken slab of concrete, too heavy to move whole, was meticulously chipped away, its smaller fragments gathered. He worked without haste, each movement deliberate, each decision a conscious step towards rebuilding. There was no desperation in his actions, only a profound, almost spiritual focus. His internal world had been utterly renewed, his spirit fortified by the conscious choice he had made to embrace faith, even in the face of such overwhelming destruction. The lingering doubts, the sharp pangs of abandonment, the gnawing questions of purpose. They had not vanished entirely, but their power over him had diminished significantly. They were now like distant echoes, background noise against the surging current of his renewed conviction. His faith was no longer a fragile, theoretical concept. It had become an anchor, a solid, unyielding point of reference in a world that had otherwise dissolved into chaos. This internal transformation was not a sudden burst of euphoria, but a deep, abiding sense of peace, a quiet strength that transcended the physical realities of his surroundings. He found an old dented bucket, surprisingly intact, and began to fill it with smaller, salvageable items. Shards of glass that might serve as tools, pieces of wood that could be kindling, fragments of metal that held potential. Each item was assessed not for its original purpose, but for its potential in a world redefined. He envisioned structures, crude perhaps, but functional, shelters that would offer protection, tools that would aid in further recovery. This was not a futile attempt to recreate the past, but an innovative act of creation, born from necessity and fueled by a burgeoning hope. The transformation was subtle, almost imperceptible to an outside observer, yet it was profound. The weight of the world which had once crushed him now seemed to rest differently, less as an unbearable burden and more as a challenge to be met. His breath came easier, his movements were more fluid, and a faint hum of energy seemed to emanate from him. He was not immune to the sorrow, for the scars of loss were deep, but he was no longer defined by it. He was defined by his resilience, by his unwavering belief that even from the ashes, life could and would emerge again. This was the essence of his renewed faith. It had changed the man before it had changed the world. It had empowered him to rebuild, not from the illusion of an untouched past, but from the raw, stark reality of the present. His spirit, once shattered, was now a solid foundation, ready to support the slow, arduous process of physical reconstruction. The world outside remained a testament to ruin, but within Elias, a new world had begun to take shape, built on the bedrock of an unshakable trust. Elias's journey, one marked by profound loss and an arduous internal struggle, serves as a poignant mirror for every individual who has faced their own landscape of ruins. It reminds us that devastation, whether physical or emotional, is an inescapable part of the human experience. We all encounter moments when the familiar crumbles, when the foundations of our world seem to give way, leaving us adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The narrator understands that Elias's story is not just a historical account of survival, but a timeless parable for the resilience of the human spirit. In the face of such utter devastation, when every tangible comfort is stripped away, faith emerges not as a naive wish, but as an indispensable anchor. It is the invisible tether that prevents complete capitulation, the quiet voice that whispers of possibility, amidst the clamor of despair. For Elias, this anchor was God, a steady presence he chose to acknowledge even when his hand seemed absent from the wreckage. This choice transformed his despair into a quiet determination, his emptiness into a fertile ground for renewal. It wasn't about a sudden miraculous intervention that cleared the debris, but about an inner fortitude that allowed him to confront the debris without being consumed by it. As Elias looks out at the horizon, his gaze is no longer shadowed by the immediate past. The ruins still stretch before him, a stark reminder of what was lost, but his eyes now perceive something more. There is no trace of the soul-crushing despair that once gripped him. Instead, a quiet, enduring hope radiates from his posture, a subtle lifting of his chin, a steady resolve in his eyes. He understands that his journey is far from over. The physical world around him still demands immense effort and countless hours of back-breaking labor. Yet, the monumental task no longer feels insurmountable. It is simply the next step, a challenge to be met with the strength he has painstakingly cultivated within. His journey is not about instantaneous repair, the magical restoration of everything that was. Such a narrative would diminish the profound truth of his struggle and the hard-won wisdom he has gained. Instead, it is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a spirit capable of finding meaning and purpose even when surrounded by the fragments of a shattered existence. This resilience, for Elias, is inextricably guided by belief, by that unwavering conviction that there is a larger order, a higher purpose, even in the chaos. It is the belief that even when the world seems to have forgotten him, he is not alone. The rebuilding he envisions is not merely physical, it is also spiritual and communal. He dreams not of recreating the old world, but of constructing a new one, perhaps simpler, more essential, built on the lessons learned from loss. His faith has provided him with the blueprint for this internal reconstruction, enabling him to approach the external world with renewed vigor and a sense of profound possibility. The path ahead is long and uncertain, filled with more challenges than he can yet imagine, but he is ready. He is no longer defined by what he has lost, but by the indomitable spirit that has chosen to rise from the ashes. His story serves as a powerful message to everyone who has ever felt overwhelmed, to anyone standing amidst their own personal ruins. It whispers that even when everything around you crumbles, even when the foundations of your life are shaken to their core, faith can still stand. It can be the unwavering pillar that supports you, the quiet strength that empowers you, and the enduring hope that guides you towards a new dawn, even from the deepest night. Elias, surrounded by desolation, chose to trust, and in that choice, he found not only survival, but the profound essence of what it means to truly live.